Everyone, this is a great masterclass with Raymond Kemp. Raymond's an interesting, he climbed from the lowest position in the Navy to the top enlisted position in the Navy over a 30-year career, met presidents we talk a little bit about in this interview, led 60,000 people. You just have a different perspective on life. Now he's a public speaker, and he's going to be with us at the UAC event, speaking Friday afternoon, and then be at dinner with us in Beverly Hills. So please, he just has a lot of wisdom. This guy is one of those people who has literally story after story after story. It's gonna be a lot of fun to have him with us out in Beverly Hills. And please take a minute to watch this. It's just gonna prep you. You'll be getting his book from us soon in the mail. Review that. This is gonna be a really pivotal event for us with the Ultimate Leadership event coming up in February. Let's jump in and get started with Raymond Kemp now. Everyone, welcome into UAC Masterclass, and today I have Fleet Master Chief Raymond Kemp with us. I met Raymond in the Dallas area a few months ago and got to sit down and have a beer together, and just realized, man, this guy's story and what he's done in his life and accomplished, both in his career in the Navy, literally, Raymond, led I don't even know how to say it probably, but you oversaw Europe, you oversaw Africa, the United States. What was really cool is Raymond's met about every U.S. president since, was it all the way back to Reagan? Raymond, you remember that, right? I mean, and his stories of sitting with all these different presidents through his career in the Navy, and he started scrubbing floors and literally worked his way up to overseeing, enlisted servicemen in the Navy in all these different countries. So Raymond has a lot to share with us, guys. First, I'll just stop there. Did I kind of get that story right? I know that's a broad stroke of it all, Raymond.
It's rightly broad because it's a lot of time, 33, over 3 decades in the Navy. And so to, try to put that into a one-liner is difficult sometimes. There's a street poet, who popularly said, "We started from the bottom and now we're here." And that's kind of how it went. Scrubbing floors, peeling potatoes, whatever, one's mind goes into. It's starting in the military. I started at that level, like absolutely entry level 1. And once it was all said and done, you're right, I was the Fleet Master Chief, Navy Europe, Navy Africa, water around that. Perhaps we'll go into what it means to be a Fleet Master Chief later, but about 60,000 people in that one position.
Wow. I guess on a simple level, a lot of people in UAC are leading groups of 5, 10, 50, maybe 100, maybe 250 people at the largest. How do you even get your head right to oversee 60,000 people? And I know it's a broad question, but I'm just like, I have a hard time conceptualizing that.
Sure. Well, thankfully, I didn't just jump in there.
Sure.
I walked my way up. 4 days in the Navy, and I really can't wait to share the long version of this story. But 4 days into the Navy, they said, "Hey, does anyone want to be a squad leader?" I put my hand up, and I led people the entirety of my career. But as I was making those steps, and that day, pardon me, that day started with 20 people. But as I made my way there, I had a guided missile destroyer, about 300 folks. I had a Harry S. Truman, an aircraft carrier, about 5,000 folks with the Embark fighting team. And so when I got to Navy Europe, Navy Africa, leading big groups of people is just the same as leading small groups. When it's 5 of them, you can touch each and every one of them. But when you're a leader who leads leaders, then that initial group, the group that's closest to you, is just super important to select the right ones, as to communicate with a high level of clarity, and then have the your executive authority to transit down through all of those folks so they can observe you interacting with them in a way with dignity and respect, and people will follow that.
I have to imagine you almost end up with a personal philosophy or take, as you move into those roles,
Right.
to bring your leadership style. How did you develop that over all those years? There has to be, I imagine you start to figure out what's effective and what's not in different situations. And at some point that becomes kind of probably how you rise through the ranks as people see the effectiveness of your leadership in these different levels. How did you develop that?
It was sets and reps. Full disclosure, it was absolutely, sets and reps, trial and error. One a pivotal point for me is I was in Japan, stationed with Admiral Harry Hang 'em High Highfield, and many people earned nicknames. He did, and he was someone was bringing him some information. I was his personal communicator at the time, so I started off in the IT world. I was his, personal guy who made sure we had access to sensitive information. And so someone came in and disclosed something to him that I knew was wrong, absolutely wrong. And I looked at him, I looked at the guy, and I looked at him, and the fella walked out. And the admiral said, people stopped telling me the truth back when I was a captain. And I said, well, if you want to know the truth, let me know and I'll be your huckleberry for real. And that day forward, he allowed me to speak truth to him in a way where I was not afraid to speak truth to power. And so when I realized if I can convey a level of care and truth to people, folks will take heed to, the things I have to say and the way that I say them. And so as I was moving into higher levels of leadership, well, I realized also there's three things that were just super duper important to me. One was the continuous pursuit of education and knowledge and to increase your capacity in the workplace. Another was remaining fit because we need to be fit to fight and ready to go. And then the third was treating people with dignity and respect. And so what I chose to do is hunker down around those three things. A- the admiral or the commanding officers who I served with had their, bedrock principles or their leadership philosophy. What I would always do is adhere, as close to that as possible, and then help them refine it so that we could state it with a measure of clarity.
I find that, we probably have around 250 people in my different organizations, and it is interesting. The higher I miss, a lot of stuff gets kept from me, and I've found the organizations where I have more of a sounding board from what's going on, it almost gets dangerous. You get isolated as a leader, and because people don't want to upset you, they think maybe they're doing you favors, but in fact, you end up sometimes really missing some important information to make strategic decisions on. Whether people want to purposely keep it from you or they love you and they're trying to protect you, and it's an issue. It's interesting to hear that even happens in a huge organization like the military, maybe even more so.
Definitely. I mean, particularly when it comes down to the combat environments or environments where people's, jobs are at risk because they didn't necessarily do something right or communicate it to their teams. Folks are very quick, to, hold those things back. A super quick story. I was in Israel talking to the very well-known leader, and as he finished a press conference, he walked off the stage, put his arm around me, just kind of shielded back all the strap hangers and press people and says, "So what exactly do you do?" The team is listening doesn't realize that, I present at about 6'1", 250 pounds. And so I'm not the average looking person per se, but he came up, put his arm on my shoulder and was like, "What is it you do?" And I had the opportunity to tell him that I'm the one who brings the truth. That's exactly what I bring the truth to the most senior people in uniform and decision makers. And I said to him jokingly, but I said it because I'm not afraid. I said, you need somebody like me, to tell you the truth because there's so much you don't know that's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that's truth finder, truth seeker. That's something most people don't have a job title of, but boy, that's important.
And being able, I think, for folks like yourself, that with that, to me, that's a really sweet spot. If you've got, 100, 250 people, that's a good space where you can be known without being, their drinking buddy. And so to be able to transit through, your organizations, and again, whether it be 250 or whether it be 50, when people realize, imagine someone saying to you, "Ah, you're just like a regular guy." Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to be the person, just sitting at the top seat. I want you to realize that we can communicate. And four things that fast learning organizations do, and that is they see, they solve, they share. Most importantly, they provide feedback. And so having space to have those conversations where people think they have to protect you from something. You want to, it's my perspective and hope that we can get leaders to illuminate those spaces so people realize they don't have to hide anything. They can just open kimono, share what they know, and see what happens from there.
Raymond, what was your take on being a drinking buddy when you're in a position of leadership? Did you find benefit in that? Did you avoid that? What route? Because I have found personally, I used to really press kind of almost trying to get to know people personally and friendly, and I've noticed as my career goes on, I steer away from that more now because maybe it's from having to fire more people over the years. I just found maybe that's a little easier holding people accountable when I'm not just their friend, but maybe I'm off. I'm curious, what was your experience and your perspective on that?
But well, I always left early. When I got into the most senior positions, I would always leave the party early. I was willing to have a beverage or maybe two because I found that beyond two, it might become an overshare environment, and I want to create that space. I want you to be as center comfortable, and I want you to bring your authentic self into the workplace. But after a tasty beverage, one maybe two, I'm blazing the trail out of there. I still speak at a fair share of evening events where there's a speaker and food and beverage and, dance or band and so forth. And I'm still at the door out of there, unless I have been asked to stay for another, giveaway or whatever the thing may be, because it's important to have a measure of care that's palatable, but not a measure of familiarity that makes them so comfortable that they may speak out of turn.
Yep.
And
Well said.
yeah, finding that space is important.
Yeah, there's an art to that. Uh, Side question I just gotta ask.
But
Uh, what was President Reagan like? What was your interaction like with that man?
Well, I'll tell you, I joined the Navy in '86, and that year I found myself in DC at an event, and even though he had just recently been shot, well, recently, maybe 1980, 81, I can't remember exactly, but I found myself in Washington DC area, and he was at an event that was like the Mayor's March or something like that, and it was almost like a drive-by, like, I'm just popping in to see what's going on. Security was very, very different. Again, even after, his attack, security was very, very different there, and it was just a brief passing, a handshake, and a look like, what is this kid? Because, I was super smart. My face was as, clean shaven as my head is now, and so he looked at me like, "What is this kid even doing here in this uniform?" Which, because, of course, I was in uniform everywhere I went those days, and it was really quick, a handshake, and kinda off he went from there, and it was, he had a measure of nobility, though, even in that passing. And that, uh, kind of a regal presence was something that I could feel it in my chest, and so that's about all I got on Ronald Reagan, aside from, an amazing, military pay bump that we got from him one year.
Ah, ha, ha, ha. That's good. How about you? Did you got to interact maybe a little more with President Obama? Is that correct?
I did. So again, quick story. My nieces, I got transferred to the Pentagon in September of '08, and my nieces, what the campaign was going, election day comes and goes, and so at Thanksgiving, I'm hanging with my cousin and my nieces, and they say, "Are you going to get a chance to meet President Obama?" And I was like, "Hold the phone. Look. This guy had a speech. He did a year in Congress. Y'all elected him. I've been doing this thing 24 years. He will be lucky if he gets to meet me." The things my nieces go running to my cousin. They're like, "Uncle Raymond said he's going to get to meet him." And sure enough, a couple months later, my cousin is my older cousin, so he's always giving me the little brother treatment. And he goes, "Oh, here we go." I'm like, "Hey, buddy, you know what's going to happen." And sure enough, a couple months later, I was selected to be the Navy's Armed Forces Inauguration Committee member. And boom, next thing you know, I met him on several occasions. A same measure of, not the same, but a similar measure of this guy is somebody. and a measure of energy. I've been in the gym, so when I shook his hand, I was like, "Yeah, you're a little guy." But he was super, super personable without being too casual, just like what we were just talking about before. Oftentimes in senior positions, if somebody from your fraternity is part of your organization or somebody you went to school with, and the next thing you know, they're working, with or for you, they may think that it's okay to just kind of nestle up a little closer to you than everybody else because you got something in common. And I did not have that feeling whatsoever with President Obama as I have with other politicians that had something in common with me. So it was neat though. Real down to earth, um, very personable. Well, again, without being overly familiar.
Yeah, I love it. That's cool. Well, the big thing I want to touch on today, kind of give everybody a little insight into what you're going to bring to the group here at our Ultimate Leadership event in February in Beverly Hills. Uh, a lot of chiropractors right now, I think staff is a big point of contention, frustration. I mean, when offices get it right, it's the stability of a small business, but when they get it wrong, with the world of Google reviews and how those now last forever, how bad it looks to your staff when there's a regular turnover happening. Right. Not to mention for years, chiropractors used to pay 15, $18 an hour, and now people can work at Starbucks. So, now chiropractors having to adjust
Right.
up, to pay more to get quality people in. And it's just, it's in which then increases overhead of the business, which then puts the pressure on the chiropractor to maybe increase rates or provide other services so that they can keep pace with overhead. So, you speak a lot about that and this idea that, there is sort of this culture now with some of these younger generations where they're nomadic almost in their employment. Give us your thoughts, insights, and a little wisdom around that, please, Raymond.
So I'd say that I fully agree. We are treating positions now as if they, we're just at a smorgasbord, walking around biting stuff and moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Organizations that are intentionally scrutinizing who it is that they bring in are able to hire the higher quality of folks. There's a organization that we worked with back in 2008, where the Navy was trying to figure out how do we increase our retention and how do we bring in the right people. And there's an organization in the Northeast where they would hire for life. That was their perspective. The folks that they were bringing in, they want to keep them forever. And the mindset seeds that organization entered into interviews and screening processes with was really, really interesting. And what I know to be true is that, as I mentioned earlier, when we treat people, when we do those four things, see, solve, share, provide feedback, that creates that psychological safety that people need to be there, bring their whole self into the workplace and not, hit a switch when they walk into the doors.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways and indicators to do that is by creating a climate that is one that people are seeking to enter into. Oftentimes people talk about the culture of a place, and I believe that culture is important. Top down. Usually it is, on a T-shirt, on a billboard, or on a coffee mug. I think it was four. You said quality is job one, and that's really climate. You want people thinking that, but I mean, that's the culture. That's the culture. You want people thinking about quality is job one and so forth. But the climate is that feeling when that car hits the parking bumper, when they put their hand on the door to walk in, that first interaction that they're anticipating, whether it be with the client or with the coworker, or peer, or a senior person, that is the climate. And that's bottom up. And so for organizations that are looking to maintain solid staff and attract solid staff, it's the climate that they enter into first. And there's a number of ways when it comes down to, sponsoring that new person into the job so they know someone when they arrive, signing them to at least a temporary mentor so that they're, moving and navigating within the organization. Various of onboarding processes that help them understand what everybody does, so they understand why what they do is so important to the team. And
Yeah.
those are keepers, and when you think about walking into an organization, and you show up and you know somebody because they've been working with you through the process, you're assigned somebody to, kind of get their finger in their belt loop and keep up with them through the initial, steps and stages. When you understand what the whole organization does and why what you do is important, people are gonna run through a troop and jump over walls in places like that.
100%, man. That's an interesting distinction. I never really thought about culture versus climate. And you're right. I just actually had an interaction with a couple staff members that were having some issues, and that was what was coming out was the climate that patients were entering into that business was off because they could feel the tension between the staff, and that's not quite a cultural thing. Climate's a different lens for that. It really is. That's a great point. Well, Raymond, I thank you for coming on. We wanted to introduce you to the group, and we're really excited to have you, present with us. And I think you're gonna be able to join us with Gary, who's speaking on Saturday at dinner, with the whole group on Friday evening, there in Beverly Hills. So, any last parting thoughts? Any homework? Anything anybody can do to prepare as we get to spend some time with you here in February?
Well, hopefully, I pass my information, for the book, so that if folks are kind of looking to hear.
Which we should let everybody know, yeah, we're getting books out to the membership, so thank you for doing that, and, the people, they might have already started receiving those, so
Okay.
thank you.
If they take a peek at that, they'll get an idea on my perspective on a few things, and then just look forward to, put on your seatbelt because we're gonna get after it.
Ha ha, love it. Awesome. Raymond, thank you for your time, and, we look forward to being with you soon.
Okay, no, pleasure to be here. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.